Thanks for attending our Coaching Abroad webinar with Jamie McDonough and Rob Lovesey from Sport Connect. Sport Connect's hosting the session, and really just a few intros and housekeeping rules. So housekeeping wise, just keep the mic and your video off at all times, which you're all doing, which is perfect. And the structure of the session, Rob will host, and he will have a conversation with Jamie about his whole coaching experience and his whole career in coaching, and then how he got to being in Iceland right now, and his next steps and challenges that he's faced along the way. And then there'll be room for Q&A at the end, but also we've been given some questions throughout from guys that have signed up, so we'll be asking those throughout as well. So it'll be a mix of conversation plus question and answer, but we'll probably aim for about 45 minutes of conversation, and then hopefully the last 15 minutes up until 8 o'clock will be a Q&A session. So just before we start, we'll give a few introductions. So it's not for everyone, but to my left is Rob Lovesey, the Sport Connect, with the Sport Connect background. And then to my right is Jamie McDonough, our special guest for the night, FA Coach Tutor, and also the manager of Icelandic third division side, UMF Tindastoll. Hope I said that right. But one last week, one yesterday, didn't you? Which was good. Good win. So it's good start. And then, but yeah, I'll hand over to Rob and we'll get going. So thanks, guys.
Cheers, Marcus. Yeah, hi everyone. Thanks for attending. Obviously, this is the third of our sort of webinars in the last few weeks. We were lucky enough to have Peter Taylor, Eric Steele, and now Jamie today. There's going to be a mix of coaches on the call, different levels, and I think what we're going to have a bit of a conversational style with Jamie. We're going to learn about his background and the last few years which got him to where he is today. He's worked different coaching sort of opportunities and jobs overseas, which I think people should be able to gain some insight from. And as Marcus said, we want to make it quite interactive. So if anyone's got any questions they want to put into the chat, whilst we're chatting, Marcus will just interject and we can throw them to Jamie. We've got a range of questions that I'm going to try and get into the conversation as well. So without further ado, over to you, Jamie. I think a great place to start probably is just to summarise your background and how you got to where you are today, and we can go from there.
Hi guys, how are you doing? Bit of a step down from Peter Taylor and Eric Steele, but it's great to get involved. In terms of my journey, I've been really varied. I started as a swimming teacher essentially. I worked in almost every area of grassroots football, from working with businesses to working abroad, to then working within the FA, and eventually sort of ending up working within coach education, taking a few side steps along the way in terms of developing my skills as a teacher and trying to develop my skills within business and things like that to broaden the horizons of what's available within the game. And then most recently spent the sort of past year working in Iceland as a head coach.
I think it's going to be a good place to start, really. If you take me back, Jamie, you sent over an overview of your kind of different steps throughout your career, and it covered about a decade. So you told me earlier you're 31 years old, which is a good start. And so you said your coaching journey probably started when you're teens, mid-teens. So yeah, if you can tell us about some of the different roles you took after originally being that, as a swimming teacher as well and volunteer grassroots coach, how you got to where you are today, really.
Yeah, well, that's it. I actually started terms of coaching as a swimming teacher, and it was nothing to do with wanting to coach, or it was more a fact of an opportunity where I could make 20 quid an hour instead of making a £5 an hour in a bar when I was sort of 16. And then the club that I was playing for at the time got wind of me doing it. Like, oh, well, you can come and coach our kids as well. It's like, all right, okay. And I loved it. I absolutely loved doing it. And I guess I was lucky in that way, really fortunate to really early on in my life have this opportunity where I thought, wow, this is a job that I want to do. And that just led on step to step to the point where it was like, oh, actually, this is my career now. And it's something I want to do. And I chased it. And I guess, linked to what this webinar is actually about. the first big opportunity I got led me actually going to China. And that was the first opportunity I got in terms of professionally as a football coach. So I guess I took it, and that's what led to the current situation.
When did you how did you first come about that opportunity then? Because it's Shanghai, wasn't it? You ended up going to private academy.
I ended up having a whale of a time for 18 months in Shanghai. Yeah. Something similar to your work in terms of Sport and Connect. If I was to tell you I knew what the website or the company was at the time, I'd be lying. I think it was one of those.
You don't have to mention any competitors. That's fine, Jamie.
I honestly wouldn't know. So like we're talking 10, 11 years ago now. What I do know is that it was one of those mornings where I'd had a bad day. I was like, oh, I'll just do whatever. And it was, I think I got a phone call a few days later after I'd applied via the internet saying, oh, that, like one off your contract, do you want to, and it was, like, oh, what, really? Oh, yeah, okay. And I was actually going to Greece the next day, and they wanted me to leave in like 9 days. So I was 19, 20, and decided I wouldn't tell my family and I'd think about it. So I came home from Greece and said, oh, by the way, I'm going to China in 2 days' time. Sorry, what? What do you mean you're going to China? And yeah, that was it. It was opportunity knocks, take it and see what happens.
Yeah, that must have been a big step. I'll take it going into the relative unknown. Did you just, because you hear different things about coaching franchises overseas, some good stories, some bad stories, but I guess you had nothing to compare it against at that time. It was your first overseas role, and that was in 2009, right?
Yeah, I mean it was great for me. It was great to me. Where I was working, what I was doing, I learned so much as a person, and probably more than as a coach, but definitely as a person, and in terms of characteristics required to be successful in this world of like in the world that like in terms of football. I learned a lot about dog eat dog, and I learned a lot about, for want of a better word, people who can talk the talk. And it was beneficial to recognize those things, but also the experience and the culture. The experience and the culture of it really opened my eyes to what's possible and what's plausible. The whole world opened up almost within a minute.
Really?
I actually landed there. I wasn't a sheltered kid. I travelled quite a lot. I travelled extensively, like as a young guy, and as a child as well, to be honest. And I wasn't sheltered, but I landed in Shanghai, and the girl from the office who was supposed to pick me up, brought like when in an airport they bring, you have signs with your names.
Yeah.
Well, she brought the sign in Chinese. Apparently. So I'm walking around Shanghai with nowhere to go, no idea what I'm doing, not a clue. Back then it wasn't internet on the phones and stuff. So that was there was a moment of, oh, this is a good idea, wasn't it? But it was, well, actually, I don't need to panic. I'm absolutely fine. I know how to look after myself. And then you overcome these things, and everything else that occurs subsequently just seems a lot easier.
So you said about the language straight away there, because there's going to be a lot of coaches on this call that maybe have looked at opportunities that come up in China, because the pay's, to be honest, they pay your accommodation, the pay's quite reasonable. It's probably good for a point in your life if you haven't got any responsibility sometimes, and you can just, like you say, up and leave without much notice. But what were the biggest challenges you faced in that immediate role then?
Honestly, when I think back, I don't see challenges, like in sense of the word. Like maybe in terms of like challenges that you enjoy, yes. But I was living a dream. I was getting paid to coach football in this new world, this new place that I'd never been to before, and it was exciting. It was And I don't actually see, like, you know, like, I think I had a great job. Essentially, we worked 3 hours a day maximum, apart from at the weekends. You know, we worked we worked longer days on the weekends, but Monday to Friday, we worked 3 hours a day, and almost just lived an incredible life. So in terms of challenges, I would say probably just what you miss from home, you know, family and friends, but you've got to accept that. You know, like
I suppose it's even easier now with technology to stay in touch, where back in 2009 it must have been back to traditional Skype or something like that.
it was back when Skype still doesn't work, does it?
No.
It's still a company. Skype doesn't work, but it definitely didn't work back then. Facebook was just a brand new. It was you know, like, it was the big thing at the time. But obviously, it was. I don't know. Well, not obviously at all. Unless you've been to China, it's banned in China because they use their own versions. So that wasn't. You know, like, there were ways around it, but it wasn't an acceptable means to do it, to communicate. So it was, and then obviously the time barrier, and people at work. So being 8 hours ahead of things, like, if I wanted to speak to family and stuff, it would be at 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning when they finished work. So that, you know, that was quite difficult.
So that chapter in Shanghai, do you look at that in terms of in your coaching, in your pathway and your journey? Was that more to help you develop as an individual and learn a bit more about the culture? It wasn't necessarily developing too much as a coach, or?
I think I learned a lot about the skills of a coach, which at the time wasn't necessarily what I was looking for. You know, I'd learned so much from FA courses and from some of the tutors that I had, and I wanted more of that. And at times it frustrated me, but looking back, that part wasn't anywhere near as important as the skills and the characteristics of coaching that I learned being out there. Story that I tell people quite a lot from being out there. You know, like, you might be able to tell. I don't know. Like, it's like, I'm actually from Newcastle, but like, my accent now is nothing compared to what it was. You know, I've been gone 10, 11 years, whatever now. But when I first went there, I had a real Geordie accent. And I remember being there the first few days, and I've stood in front of a group of kids from an international school. You know, I think one was Australian, one was Dutch, one was English, one was Chinese. And I've started talking, and the Australian kid's gone to the Dutch kid, like, little nudge. What language is this guy talking?
Yeah.
They all speak English to each other. What language is this guy talking? And I've heard it, and I'm thinking, not good, is it? Like, I'd only ever worked in Newcastle. So then, you know, like, as a skill, as a communication skill, and then I'm start, like, how important, and that's still relevant to me today. So, like, I actually learned how to control my own voice, but also to contextualize for the environment. You know, like, I've got some English guys out here who actually work as coaches, and one of the things to say is that you keep things simple. It's because you have to. Like, you can't use some of the catchphrases that you'd use in English football. That doesn't work here. They don't know what that means. So you have to be consistently careful and concise and have that clarity in your communication.
Have you done anything to develop your communication skills outside of, like, FA courses, for example, or is that something you just naturally sort of try and develop yourself?
My biggest thing, so I've always loved watching people who have that ability to hold a room. Do you know what I mean? That ability to clearly communicate with a whole room and keep them hanging on to what they want to say. I'm not very good at it. I know that because I spend a lot of time video recording, like things like team meetings and stuff. But it's developing that each little time, like that, or that one little thing. So saying the word "M" is a big reminder. Don't need to do that. You know, like, if you've got what you're saying ready, say it. Be prepared. Have that planned. So trying to remove that word. Now, like, you know, like, some of the things that I observe, and it's the same for me as coaching. When you observe that, you recognise the small details, and then you can do something about it.
So you said there about actually recording. So you recorded the delivery of some of your team talks, for example, and little tactics like that. So you're actually looking at it from what the engagement with the players, but also how you come across as well. Just a different perspective, really.
Sorry. Yeah, in terms of communication, it's something I learned from China. That how incredibly important it is. You know, you can have all the knowledge in the world, but the art of coaching is getting it from yourself to the person you're working with. You've got to get from one side to the other. It's not a download thing. You don't download from my brain to theirs.
Yeah.
Sorry, I've got something stuck in my throat. I'm going to get.
No, it's interesting. It's interesting you saying that, because that's, you know, a lot of coaches on the call, even if they're, you know, their ambition is to work overseas and they're not at the moment, that's something people can easily pick up and just do from, you know, grassroots or academy coaching here in the UK. You know, little tips like that, which kind of make you think, actually, yeah, quite good to gain an outside perspective. Look at yourself, how you deliver the message. Look at the engagement of, you know, your players or your coaching staff. So let's go on from Shanghai. So you came back and then you started doing some work with Newcastle Foundation.
Yeah. So I initially came back to do my UEFA B license. Again, it's little steps and those little, I don't know, like the little butterfly moments where you have a choice and you decide where you go, and who knows how life pans out. I applied to do a B license because a lot of the opportunities in China required that UEFA distinction. So when that opportunity came to do the B license, my plan was to come back, do the B license, and go back to China.
Yeah.
When I started doing the B license, I then started to learn of other things going on in England and opportunities, and I was like, okay. Sorry, I'm really not hungry.
That's all right.
Right, that's better.
Go for it. Yeah, did the opportunity in Newcastle came up, and was the money, was it similar kind of money? Did you have to take a step back, or
a real step back? So without, you know, going into figures, I would say that I was earning, when I went to Newcastle, I was then probably working twice as much to earn half as much.
Wow.
And, you know, obviously working other jobs. I went back to teaching swimming because it was guaranteed work, a guaranteed opportunity to, you know, get that income.
So you had to sacrifice a lot, and like you say, put a hell of a lot of hours in to get where you wanted to be. But at that point, by doing that and taking that role with Newcastle, were you now thinking about the long-term journey of where you wanted to be?
That was it. So recognizing through doing the B license and meeting people within that, so that networking allowed me to open up avenues and windows that I didn't understand before. So I got to work. It's not happening. It's not going well.
Yeah.
Oh, I know what it is. I'm sitting next to the radiator.
Yeah. That's it. We're not used to your climate out there, are we? We're all sitting having a bit of an English summer. I don't know what the weather is like in Iceland right now. I should have searched that before the webinar. What time is it out there, by the way?
It's just 1 hour before.
Okay, so it's only 1
Even
hour.
opening the window makes a difference. On a really bad time. Yeah, so I started getting to work with people who worked within the FA, people who, you know, tutored, did coach education, and recognizing that there was jobs for people like me with the right ambition, like to work towards. You know, prior to that, my experience in England was of essentially a boys' club where you had to know someone who knew someone, and you can get in there and you can have a bit of job there, you can have a bit of work there, and especially within Newcastle and the size of the club, and then obviously it's not London where there is 30 clubs,
Yeah.
academies where, you know, like I was the same as a lot of people. Like, I wanted to work at the academy, great. You know, that's my, I want to. Then I started to recognise and learn and understand more about the game and coaching and kids and all sorts, and the opportunities that were available. And that whole I want to work in the academy thing started to disappear. And it was more of a, right, I can gain the sort of, you know, the FA Youth Awards and things like that when they came out. They broadened my horizons to the detail and the depth, and then obviously the opportunities that work around that, especially within the FA. And I started to target, right, okay, I want to work within that organisation. I respect and value what they're doing.
Yeah. Yeah, because that took you after Newcastle then. You're still doing your private work as a swimming teacher, and then FA skills coach with Surrey. So I take it from your CV, you're someone that's not averse to moving. You know, yeah, it's not like, I know you've probably got your roots in Newcastle, but you're happy to. You got to be flexible. I take it in the role to be able to take these opportunities as and when they come up and make that jump.
My granddad used to tell me when I was young, he said 2 things, like, you only ever told me 2 things, never told me off for being naughty or anything like that. 2 things. When you grow up, do something that you want to get out of bed on a Monday morning for, whatever it is. And the other one was, you only ever regret things that you don't do. Bit of a risky thing to tell a young man, I think, but like it's like one of those things that's always stuck with me. And that opportunity, so, you know, I wanted to work as an FA skills coach in the Northeast, but you're waiting for someone to leave. The opportunity was there, the opportunity came, and then the question is really, you know, like, what's the worst what can happen? You don't like it, you jack your job in and you come back, or you might actually quite like it. It was difficult for the first, I'm going to say, 5-6 months. London's not a great city to move to in terms of social life. You know, like it's quite closed off, especially if you're working. My working family, if you like, lived in completely different parts of Surrey.
Yeah.
So that connection wasn't there through that. And you have to work hard to develop relationships which make your life away from work what you want it to be. I think that's one of the biggest, you know, like London was actually the biggest challenge of doing that, but it's a challenge that you face every time you leave somewhere to go somewhere new for a job, like linking back to the purpose of the webinar.
Yeah. So essentially, yeah, it's that challenge, and by you taking those steps, it sounds like every step you're taking is, okay, it's not only developing your coaching ability and your experience, but also you as a person really adapting. So when it comes to a role like you are now in Iceland, you've got all that other experience behind you. So, you know, it's not unusual environment to be somewhere you turn up, you don't know anyone, and you've got to sort of make a fresh start of it, I guess.
Is coaching really that different from the importance of developing relationships? It's the key to it all in terms of connecting with your players, with the players that you're working with. Without that connection, the rest of it, you've got that circle of connection, and the rest of it comes out of that.
Yeah.
So the things that I've learned from those opportunities to be in that situation, to have to like put yourself out there in a place where essentially you're kind of annoying people. I'll be honest with you. When I moved to China, like a guy who's still my mate now, but he was like my best mate out there, I know I was annoying him, like calling him, like, what are you doing today? Like, you're thinking, he'd been there a couple of years, he's thinking, I've got my own mates. Who's this kid, man? But I had to have something. And I had to have that thing, that first connection to then build others.
Yeah, you got to put yourself out there basically, and force that. So yeah, okay. So you obviously then started working your UEFA A, and you did numerous roles. Got your UEFA A. But what was interesting for me is you also had a go at starting up your own football academy as well. So Let's Play UK. And I know that there's a lot of coaches that will be doing, part-time hours, also have, full-time job like yourself, maybe swimming teaching, and then they're weighing up that balance of, okay, there's limited opportunities in the professional game, so why not look at starting my own academy? So it would be really good if you could share some insight into, I guess, the challenges you face there, the process, and I guess why you're not doing it today.
It was born out of necessity to begin with. It was an idea that I had for a while, but it was born out of necessity in terms of a redundancy from the FA part-time, like my full-time job within the FA. So I retained my part-time roles delivering coach education. But then I was in a position where it was like a big choice and a big decision. I didn't want to go into the academy game. I say that not arrogantly, like as if I could just walk in there. Like that's not what I mean. That it'd be difficult for me with my experience to get roles within academies anyways. It wasn't something I wanted to do. I worked as a teacher. I delivered in terms of 16 to 18 college education things, but I wanted to stay in football. I put a lot of time, effort, and energy into developing the knowledge that I believed was valuable especially to young people. Okay, the best way to do that is to create a business. And obviously, I'd been looking at times at friends' salaries and things like that and going, I'm quite happily sit here and say, I was making £20,000 a year in London. And I knew guys.
That doesn't go far in London, does it? That's the thing.
Exactly. And, I knew guys who were working as cleaners, working as managers in McDonald's after like 6 months of working there, who were making £7,000, £8,000, £9,000 a year more than me. And it's a very important question of like, how do you marry these two things up? How do you marry up the fact that, look, you've had your kind of nice, footloose, fancy-free 20s, but eventually you want to have a family, you want to be able to settle down and be able to provide for things that are required. So setting up a business seemed like it was the logical way to go about that. It wasn't in my eyes. So in my eyes, I wasn't as successful as I thought I might be, or I wanted to be. I think the idea I had was positive and good in terms of that, the name Let's Play is around, basically sums up of what my target was, to provide an environment of play for kids to develop and then utilize that environment to support them with coaching, rather than build a coaching academy that sometimes lets them play.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
My experience, my contacts within schools, within clubs, and the amount of people that I'd worked with within that philosophy who loved that philosophy, and my explanation and understanding of why it's logical for kids in terms of what they want, but also what they need. But the bottom line when it came to it was that idea doesn't marry with finance. That people, so say schools want a badge or to be seen to be delivering something which is structured. Not saying that what I was doing was not structured.
But they wanted to see some outcome in terms of the kids achieve this, and then they get awarded, like you say, some kind of certificate or some kind of accreditation. Is that?
I think more around control.
Okay.
We see a lot more around control, and that they weren't a lot. So the schools that I actually worked in and got contracts in, absolutely loved what I did. But the initial phase of trying to get contracts, often from schools as well, who I'd worked in previously, with teachers who were saying to the people who held the purse strings, bring him in, bring him back, like working there within the FA, but it was that moment of they have to sell this idea and they can go to Chelsea.
Yeah.
Parents, we're bringing Chelsea in. Oh, wow, look at that. And it's the same in terms of the after school stuff. It's parents would rather pay, from what my research, parents would rather pay 15-20 pounds an hour for someone who says that they're going to, I'm going to probably get in trouble with this, but someone who says, we make footballers.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, but Chelsea are the only people who make footballers around here. But that's the sale. It's not about the kids. It's about the parents. The parents pay the money.
Yeah. So you're selling to the parents, and that's the way to hook them in, essentially. So then did you quickly make the decision to sort of say, actually, okay, running the coaching business is not for me, and I'm just going to focus on coaching? Did you know when that point was apparent? Because I speak to a lot of coaches that they're thinking about starting a coaching school or academy. They then do it, and a lot of them it hasn't worked out, and sometimes they don't know when enough's enough, and to make that decision because they're emotionally attached, they put a lot into it. Was that a tough one for you?
There never came a point when I guess one of my biggest problems and faults would be in business that I'm really against quitting, much to my detriment at times. I think it's a really great skill to recognize when it is that something's not quite right and not quite working. So like, even when I moved here, I continued running arms and sections of the business that were successful. I'm still utterly convinced that the idea is sound, but my business knowledge and principles are not. It requires a level of so to change the format and the model from selling to parents, coaching academy, make your kid good, we'll get your kid to this place,
Yeah.
Selling promises to parents rather than selling an environment to children. You've got to find the way to sell the environment to children, to the parents.
The parents, yeah, and make them connect with that.
Yeah, and I think I spoke to a guy who actually worked with me as work experience kind of thing a few years ago within the FA, and he's just recently set up a business. And I spoke to him the other day, and the first thing I asked him was, "What is your USP? What's your unique selling point?" And it is because that's the key. You've got to find a way to hook the parents, the kids. If they like what you do, and they'll keep coming back, but you've got to get them there first.
That's interesting. I know we've delved into your sort of background, but I think it sets the context for everyone on the call to learn a bit more about you, the challenges, what built you as a person. And now we go to like present day. So head coach, Tindastoll. So take me back to how that opportunity arose. How you are where you are now. Let's go for it.
You know how there's a saying in football, it's not what you know, it's who you know.
Yeah, we hear it a lot. Yeah,
it is. It's true. But you've got to know, when you get there, you've got to know what it is. You've got to know the no as well.
Yeah.
But I think the thing that I've learned over, all these different roles and opportunities that I've been lucky and fortunate enough to find myself in, not just the stuff we've talked about, the variety of part-time stuff and voluntary stuff. It's often not the people that you think it will be. That's the key. And this came about through somebody I knew back in Newcastle sending me something, requesting a goalkeeper coach. I was working with a guy who was a goalkeeper coach. I said, do you fancy this in Iceland? Because I know he was a bit of a dead end in his career, and he applied for it, he got it. So he was working as a first team goalkeeper coach out here. Not the guys, the big guys within the FA who go to big jobs in academies and things like that. It wasn't those that provided. It was my mate who was a bit of a dead end goalkeeping coaching within local clubs in Surrey. And he comes out here, then obviously a head coach role comes available, the town down the road. He talks to the guy who's, the chairman here.
Yeah.
You know what? I actually do know a guy who'd be great at this. I get a phone call, not the other way, not me applying. I get a phone call, do you know what I mean? But not because I'm the best person for the job. I think there's probably 10,000 people in the world better at this job than I am. But I made a good contact and a good relationship with somebody who obviously at some point respected my knowledge or what he'd seen me do to sort of suggest me.
So that phone's gone. You've taken the call. What's the next step? You're flying out to then discuss the role. Was it a short contract to start, or I guess that was a kind of new discussion for you to have as a potential head coach of. Am I correct in, are they a full-time professional or are they semi-professional?
So it's a weird environment out here. There's professional players, then there's guys who don't get paid, like local boys. There's loan players who get paid from their parent club, and it's very. But we train full time. We train just not on the same sort of schedule. So we train every evening. I'm actually watching the boys from the window right now, doing their recovery session from yesterday. The next step was to play that pretend game with my girlfriend that I was, I've got to think about it, it's a big move, but I'll play that pretend game while she sits there going, yeah, you're gone, see you later.
Yeah.
So like, she said to me, prior that, she's like, I don't know why you bother, like, you can't help yourself. And I think she's kind of right, like, it was never going to be no. It was always going to be, I think, like I said before, what's the worst what can happen? I don't like it. I hate it. I get back on a 40 quid EasyJet flight back to London, start again.
Yeah. And like you say, these opportunities don't come around too often. You know what it's like, how competitive it is. Yeah. And for it to come through a contact of yours that you probably didn't see it coming, to all of a sudden be in that situation, I suppose you've got to embrace it. And it's those points in your life where you've got to decide, is it right for you, is it not? And I guess at that point for you, it was the right thing to do. So again, so you're out there, tell us about your experience, I guess, now where you are today and what you've learned and how it differs from, what you're doing previously.
I now have the greatest job in the world, whether by luck, by a slice of I know I've worked hard, and I know I've made sacrifices at certain times along the way, but I have the greatest job in the world, and I don't never stop feeling lucky. I get to spend 6 days a week working with football players to try and get 3 points on a Saturday, and it's brilliant. The difference between that and the other role, the sacrifices are huge. They're huge. I mean, not much different to people in England, I suppose, but I haven't had a haircut in the 2 months I've been here. Plus the 3 months in England of Corona, you can probably see.
You started out well.
it's those sacrifices are really relevant because at times it starts to affect your relationships with other people. 18-hour days, because you feel that responsibility, because or I know personally as a person for myself that if I don't get 3 points on Saturday, I'm going to go back every single thing I've done 6 days beforehand and find the reason why it's my fault that I didn't. But that's the downside. The best, the part is that I'm doing what I set out to do, and I traversed that journey. There's times when I was quite happy and I settled and okay, well, that's not. But I think eventually that opportunity to chase the dream that you want, the thing that you want to actually achieve, it invigorates you as a person. It really sparks it. And if that opportunity knocks, it's a bit like if next door orders a pizza, and the pizza man comes to your door. Open the door, man. Open the door. Open that door.
It sounds like you've had to pursue your dream, and by your own admission, it's quite a selfish kind of role in terms of you're doing 6 days, you're focusing on that game, and then after that game, you're thinking about what happened. Have you had to make a lot of sacrifices along the way?
Yeah.
In terms of personal relationships, stuff like that? Because again, that's stuff that's going to be going through our coaches' heads in terms of if I do make that move, what am I giving up? And like you say, is it worth it?
I mean, big time. I've made kind of bigger moves than a lot of people do, people move to London for work, but Newcastle to London's on a Friday night, that's 9 hours driving, and it's So like I'm kind of used to it. Obviously, China is not a quick nip home, is it? But I'm kind of used to it. But there are times when you do reflect on the things that you miss, and it is something that I would always suggest that people who are thinking about this, they do consider it with their own circumstances. You know, I'm very fortunate that I've got I've got a girlfriend back in London who she's been here for the last few months, but she's back in London, who's not had a problem with me living here for a year. Like, I know that wouldn't be everyone's circumstance, but also there's the other things, you know. So, you know, I see my family 2-3 times a year, and I have done for the last sort of 10 years. And it is a big thing in that they all have really close relationships, and I necessarily don't have that anymore. You know, they understand, and I understand what the purpose is, but there's also it is that trade-off of what do you want and what are you going to gain from it, because is it worth it?
Yeah. And do you think there's any right time to be doing this in terms of the timing, I guess, was right for you? And I assume you get to a point in life where if you're earning a certain amount of money, you've got a mortgage or you've got family, you've got kids, there might come a point where making that decision to go to Iceland, for example, is just not, even if the opportunity presents itself, it's just not practical.
I'm not sure I can give advice on that, to be very honest.
Personal circumstances, yeah.
Yeah, like I've lived quite a footloose, fancy-free kind of life so far. Yes, but yes and no. You know, there's that opportunity. For me, from my own personal experience, that opportunity doesn't always come twice, and it doesn't come thick and fast. And again, you know, like, do you regret the things that you do, or do you overcome the hard times that they cause and you forget about the reasons why? Or do you stick with your 17 and the dealer gets blackjack? Well,
Yeah.
I guess it's personal preference, personal choice based on circumstances.
Yeah, so there's always like an element of risk involved, I guess, in terms of whatever decision you're making in terms of this role that you're in now. It could have not worked out, but obviously now you're further down the line, you're progressing well there. What's the next few years look like for you in terms of, is this another step in that journey to getting, where do you want to end up?
So I think the same as everyone, when like every guy who's my age, when you start this, you know, I meet quite a lot through coach education. You know, it's what do you want to do? I want to be a Premier League manager. You know, I want to manage Newcastle United. That was my, you know, like, I think things become a lot clearer as you move through life. But also, you know, like, not what's possible, but what you actually want. I'm not sure anymore that that's what I would want. I think there's other things in my life that I enjoy that those sort of things would kind of put pay to a little bit, in terms of that is a real 12 months a year for the rest of your life. All you do is you think, sleep, eat, drink football. Whilst I love it, I have other interests and other things that, like, so things like actually traveling, like, that really do pique my interest. So within that, my ideal world changed a little bit. So having the opportunity to work as a coach, work with the excitement of competition and competing, but also the opportunity to travel with that and to experience different cultures. So having the opportunity to come here has opened my eyes a little bit to some of the other things, some of the other worlds in football. You know, journeymen players who travel the world. Like, I didn't know so much about it till I came here. You know, a lot of these guys are bang average, but I know, like, they've lived in Thailand, Germany, Norway, Iceland, Australia. You're thinking, hey, what? So these clubs have coaches too. They're bringing in foreign players. They'll bring in foreign coaches.
So it's opened your eyes to that. But if you're a coach that had no experience or no access to that kind of world, what would you be recommending right now?
How to get into that kind of world?
Yeah. So how to get into it. It feels like a lot of it, you've had some opportunities through contacts that you've built, and like you said, you never know you know, it's not necessarily the person you think that's going to be the one that makes a difference. So it's again relationships, making sure you're there ready for that opportunity.
Yeah, if anyone finds the answer to that, I'd like to join in as well. It's, you know, it's people all over the world. There's people, and I think it's contacts. It's purely contacts, and how you build them essentially is your own game. It's a game. It's the same.
So tell us about your contacts then, because obviously you've got social media profile. I see you're on LinkedIn. I connected with you earlier. You've got Twitter. How do you utilize your contacts on those platforms?
At present, it's been quite a surreal thing with the COVID thing. So obviously there's players all over the world who rely on football for opportunities. That's no longer possible in 85% of the world.
Yeah.
Whereas here is well publicized that we've started. So at the minute, it's not going out and building connections.
They're coming to you.
It's trying to build the time to make valuable connections with the right people. You know, like I genuinely cannot respond to the amount of agents and individuals sending me videos and this, that, and the, like, completely unsolicited. So this small opportunity that I got here has opened my world and contact and network book to a whole other world that wouldn't have been there. How you find that and how you get into that, you know, I think a lot of it is talking and finding the people that you do know who do have those contacts and trying to build your way into that. I've worked hard to do that in Iceland, working with, you know, even to the point of asking other coaches if I can come and work with them for like one day. Can I just come and watch what you do? Obviously, you know, so some of them are like, well, no, but others say yes. And then you build I've built relationships with 2 or 3 now, where I now have a clearer idea of the opportunities available out here. You know, when someone might be losing their job, when it might be happening, and it's. But I think if anyone knows the answer, you know, they're the kind of people that I want to connect with.
I suppose we only obviously started chatting earlier today, just planning this call, and it's interesting chatting to you and learning your story, because it feels like you put yourself in those situations. So you've made your own luck really by building those relationships. You've had to, like when you've moved overseas, when you've made approaches to speak to people, you've been the one that's been proactive to create that environment to get you where you are today. So I guess for me as an amateur coach, it resonates because sometimes you need to get out your comfort zone as well, sometimes to have those relationships or to make yourself stand out or speak to those individuals to build your network and your connections.
Yeah, 100. I agree. Like I think some of the guys in here will know me from like as a coach education thing. I'm still quite often an introverted person, but they'll never see me as that. Like I actually do at times have to build up the courage to have those conversations, you know, and to put down the WhatsApp thing and pick up the phone, because, you know, obviously that makes more sense and that's easier to connect with people that way. But it's not always just an instant, all right, well, I'll do this and I'll do that. You know, like you've got to plan conversations. You've got to plan what can I provide that person? You know, how can I be of value to them? Because if I'm of no value to them, then that relationship's very one-sided and it doesn't end with me getting anything out of it. So
so you're being quite strategic in your networking, really, there, aren't you? You're thinking, who do I need to connect with? What am I going to bring to the table? Because, like you say, it's a two-way. Relationships like that have got to be two-way, haven't they? You've got to bring something to the party. It's interesting because I know it's about you, but when I founded Sport and Connect, that was via Twitter. I tweeted 50 footballers, professionals, and one of them responded, which is now my business partner. He was playing for Brentford at the time, and that was about something completely different, and it opened a conversation. And from that, you know, that was best part of 10 years ago, and we've got a really good working relationship now. So I hear what you're saying in terms of if I hadn't have done that and been proactive, I wouldn't have got, been sitting here on this call with you. And it's the same for any sort of environment, whether it's coaching or just life in general. No, that was really interesting. I think some good takeaways. We've got some questions that came through in advance. Some we've covered, but I'm going to fly through them and just see if we can cover them as we go. So had some about what made you, what prompted you to work overseas, but I think you covered that. It was from being inquisitive and wanting to travel and sort of being the right point in your life. Did you have, are there any challenges you faced working abroad that you probably, you feel you wouldn't have faced in the UK? This came in from Ryan. It was quite an interesting one. So maybe challenges that you face in the UK or you perceive you face in the UK, which you don't when you're overseas. Are there any barriers that aren't there that might be in the UK?
I think that the challenges and the barriers are the best part, because that's the part which develops you and your character and your learning and brings something new to the table. And it puts those things that make you innovate and they make you have to think differently about what you do. I would say that, one of the big barriers and the big problems out here, the English boys out here, we were laughing about it yesterday. We've been on 2 away trips this week. One of them took 2 days and one of them took 19 hours for 90 minutes of football. One of them was 9 hours there, an hour and a half ferry. It's obviously stay over, ferry back, bus back. And it puts in little barriers and little challenges to the way that you want to do things. Obviously, we've then got these games in a week and we can't work on our own game. We can't work on our conditioning. So we have to change the cycle to match that and to meet that. And then I guess the other one is obviously always the language barrier and trying to develop your understanding of certain things quickly. So you need to know if people are talking about you in front of you. That's that's really important really quickly. And you also need to know the tone around you, because often different cultures have different characters in the way that they do that, and that culture is so important for understanding your players and understanding the people that you work with.
How have you developed that then, in terms, or is that more your own sort of personal sort of judgment and just instinct on picking up on things like that, body language, etc., or have you actually done anything to try and help develop that side of you?
Spending as much time as possible with them. So little things like on those long way journeys, often on the way there, I'll sit at the front of the bus with the assistant, etc. But on the way back, I'll often go and sit somewhere random. So like yesterday, I sat on the back of the bus and about 8 or 9 of us played a stupid little game that we played for about 3 hours. But it developed that relationship. But also it helps you to understand different things like language. So the guys all speak English, but when they talk to each other, they speak Icelandic.
Okay.
So it helps you to pick up different things and different words that you might not have heard before, and it supports that.
That's interesting. So sometimes, how you kind of know when you're gaffer, when you're the coach, and then you also know when to be human and to be like, personable, not a friend necessarily, or sometimes a friend. I guess it's a fine balance.
I don't know. It's one of those things where I think I bring something different to a table that a lot of people that have been a lot more involved in the pro game and stuff potentially don't. I don't see it as a hierarchy. So like my guys, if you ask them, I hope, and I think I do ask them enough, they see it more as a circle than a pyramid. So my role in the circle is different to my centre forward's role, but his role is very different to the goalkeeper's. My role is not to play. My role is to support around different areas, whether that's tactical or whether that's technical learning or whether that's purely about organisation of travel.
That's quite interesting then. So you're saying rather than a hierarchy, like a traditional triangle, you actually see it with you and your players as a circle. So you're all as one.
Yeah.
And you've all different role to play in that circle, rather than having that perception of, this is the hierarchy of power. Do you is that something that you developed yourself, or is that something that was taught to you?
There's a guy who works in London FA now, the county coach developer, called Kevin Green, who potentially has had the biggest influence on my entire life in terms of work. And some of his styles of both management and building relationships and making people feel valued and things really rubbed off on me. Like, so I'm not saying that is something that he does, that's not his kind of thing, but it made me think the way he worked with me as an employer, like not an employer, he's my man, like line manager.
Yeah.
It really opened my eyes to a variety of different things. And I think coming from that different background allows for that, rather than this is the gaffer, we do this because he says this. More of an approach where, well, why can't we have this open environment where we all work together and try to build a culture which works for everybody?
It's interesting you say culture there as well, because obviously it's massive, isn't it, building that right culture, and it takes time. But do you think, did you see any challenges when you came in? Was there an existing culture that you had to change quite quickly, or was it something you could just start fresh?
My own personal viewpoint of it was that if I walk into a club and I try to change everything about it that I'm not so sure about, I'll be met with walls, if that makes sense. I think that people put up walls if you try to drag them away from their norm instantly, rather than providing reasonable variety to the things that they do. But then there are cultures within it where it's taken me almost a year to be within a standing that allows me to do it. So as an example, yesterday we won away, but yesterday is actually the first time we've won away in 2 years. And, you know, like they can have all the excuses in the world, but it's the small 1%. So the cultures over here of certain things that we're not supporting this, but they're very keen on. Little things like, oh, well, I don't need to go to bed early the day before an away game because I can sleep on the bus.
Okay, yeah.
Yesterday was their first day where I dictated, you know, so we talk about that circle again. I say dictated, I didn't. I put in place the fact that what we do to get those 1% is to put down, they have a favourite energy drink out here. So they'll get on the bus with 3 cans of that. Not valuable. Not valuable to them in terms of performance when they drink 3 cans of energy drink and then 2 hours later they go try and play 90 minutes. But it's their, you know, diet's quite a big thing out here. It's not as varied as potentially other places because of the markets and the finances and import export. But it took me a year to have the standing where I was comfortable to say, do you know what, that is now disappearing, and to be trusted and not to be worked around because they want their favourite drink.
Yeah. They kind of know you're doing it for the benefit of the team. And like you say, if you've got your first away win in 2 years, that puts you even better stead the next time you want to make another decision, isn't it? Because they've sort of got your back. I'm just conscious of the time. Can you go over, Jamie? Is that all right? Because we're coming up to 8 o'clock. You all right?
I'm fine. I'm just
we can go through some of these other questions. Because I know the conversations we sort of divulged a little bit, but here we go. So, any recommendations for working abroad or places from a football and coaching perspective, Nick has asked, that you would particularly recommend? I guess there's a few from your experience, or is there any that from your contacts that you've heard about are good places to sort of try and seek new opportunities?
Malaysia, Barbados, so somewhere with a bit more sunshine than here. I think so. From my own experiences and what I know, Scandinavia is a great opportunity because of the language barrier is not complete. So kids, so you're working as a youth coach or working as a senior coach, kids out here can all speak pretty good English by the age of 9 or 10. I think it's probably 5 in Sweden. Norway, similar. you know, like it's an opportunity where you can get that new culture, you can have something, you can be somewhere completely different, and the opportunities are different, but without a complete and utter language barrier which you have to overcome first. I think that's that's quite important. Places where there's large expatriate communities, because English is then therefore quite often widely spoken within the areas you'll be working in. So China is a great opportunity. I know the amount of finance that they're putting in over there into developing football is incredible. And, you know, the expertise that English coaches bring through our, not my own personal, but like through the English FA's coach education system should never be disregarded. There'll be coaches in England who potentially regard themselves as grassroots coaches or amateur coaches trying to break into full-time work, who would go to places and they would be the most complete coaches there. Their knowledge and understanding of both the profession, but also of how to deliver within a program that's beneficial for everyone involved in the right way and create the right environments, their knowledge will be exceptional compared to some places that I've either first-hand experience of or had conversations about.
Yeah, so basically don't underestimate the value of your coaching qualification, your FA one. Because, okay, you might be struggling for opportunities in the UK, but overseas, they're very sought after.
Not necessarily the qualification, it's the knowledge that the environment you've been in provides. I think, especially in England, where we're very quick, especially like people that I work with, like, we're quite quick to gloss over just how far we've come in 10 years. From when I started, so 15, 16 years ago, from when I started, what the word coaching meant in England, like even within like the academy system, to what that means and what that looks like now, and the depth of detail and understanding is, in my eyes, incredible. To have changed that culture in such a quick period of time, and the rest of the world, you know, barring some fantastic examples, they're playing catch up. But our guys, the English guys, have that. They have that knowledge built into them through their environments and experiences already, and the people that they've worked with, and the relationships they've got, that really do support them to go to these places and really have an exceptional impact.
That's good. Well, the next one was question from, bear with me. So Dimitar, he asked, okay, so how can people find coaching opportunities overseas? Any advice? Or generally, let's say they wanted to come to Iceland to coach. Where would you start if you weren't lucky enough to have your mate who was a goalkeeping coach who could pick up the phone and let you know? I mean, is it, you know, because obviously Sporting Connect, we post opportunities that come up, and we know they are sought after and they're few and far between. Yeah. And you know, your club in Iceland, for example, won't know to come to Sporting Connect and post the job, for example. So we have to search the internet a lot for these different opportunities. We know how tough it is, and we've got people that are paid to do it daily. So there's no easy answer to this, I guess, but I'm going to throw it out there to you.
I guess the tough answer is get here first and figure it out later. Whether that's 4 or 5 days. And so, give you an idea, I went to Malta back in January. I just used social media to connect with people and prior contacts to connect with people and say, look, I'm going to come over. Can I come and watch training? Can I meet you to discuss the scene in Malta, the football scene, the football environment, the football world? And I think from my experience outside of England, the football world is a lot more open to those kinds of things. I think there are closed doors in England. I'm not gonna sugarcoat that. I think that's been my experience. But everywhere else I've been, the doors aren't closed. People's doors are open. They're quite happy to talk, discuss, introduce you to people. And that's where I think the best opportunity comes from, other than trying to network, trying to use websites like yours, and trying to get that foot in the door, if you like. which obviously I'm still looking for that foot in the door to the fully professional game. Always.
So it's kind of like, it's like you, again, going back to the theme of this whole chat, really, you've got to put yourself out there. You've got to develop your network, have conversations to think about how you're going to progress as an individual. Opportunities aren't necessarily just going to come to you. If you're sitting there and you're just, waiting, looking at a website, thinking, when's this job opportunity to come up for a, assistant coaching role at your club, for example, in Iceland. Realistically, people have got to sort of take it upon themselves to sort of think outside the box a bit. And, next time they're on holiday, maybe tie in, if they're abroad for 2 weeks, if COVID ever finishes, go and spend some time, visiting some of the local football clubs and sort of making connections whilst you're out there, I guess.
I'm not an expert in this. Like, I think I know how lucky I am to be where I am. And, but I do, I have developed some of this understanding around how these things work. And I do know, like, there is such a huge supply for such a small demand in terms of coaches. And yeah, it's that doing something a little bit different. What is unique about you? What are you willing to do to put yourself in that situation or that position that will get you maybe that one quick opportunity that gets you your foot in the door?
Yeah, because we hear it a lot, obviously. Peter Taylor, Eric Steele, both are on these calls, ex-players. So they kind of got their foot in the door being an ex-pro. And like yourself, it's really great to speak to you and hear your story, someone that's managed to get to, where they want to be in life, not being an ex-player and having to create those opportunities and stand out. And it's the same what Peter Taylor said when we had the conversation with him. I said, Peter, very well, you saying, do X, Y, Z, but how does a coach stand out for you that's not an ex-player? And again, he said going above and beyond, doing something that makes you stand out from the others. He likes traditional letters, believe it or not, people that actually write to him because he's slightly old school. Things like that, be creative, think outside the box, try and make your own luck, make these breakthroughs. There's no right or no wrong, I guess, but you can try different things and, someone may just respond. Here we go, another question. So as someone who started off my coaching pathway volunteering with you, actually, Jamie, what's the best advice you could give me for expanding my coaching into other areas or countries? That's come from Anand.
I think that my best advice would be I think what I said before, like you regret, so I know Anand, he's a young guy still, you regret the things you don't do. Like you might look back in 5 years, 10 years and think, I wish I took a chance to go abroad and try it out. Whereas if you do it, you'll not go, oh God, I wish I didn't do that. Like you'll either like it or you won't. Home will probably always be there for the vast majority of people. Yes, you have to start again. You have to work hard. But when you're young, if there's something that intrigues you and interests you, give it a go. Every time I've left a place, I've left with a heavy heart. It's hard. It's really hard. But when that opportunity knocks, you've got to take it. I think if that's what if that's what you want to do, that would be my best advice. Take the chances that you get. It might not even be the exact job that you want. I've never sugarcoated to my bosses here. This isn't the exact job that I want. Yes, it's a great job. I love my job, but I want another job and another one. And they accept that. I accept that, and that's the way of the world. And it's that foot in the door still. It might just be working, say going to China and working with primary school kids, whereas you want to be a senior coach. But the bottom line is, once you're there, then doors start to open a lot quicker and a lot easier than someone paying for your flights and accommodation for someone they've never met who's on the other side of the planet.
Yeah, so it's kind of like to get to A to B, it's not like one straight road, is it? Sometimes you've got to take diversions and maybe try other things to get to where you want to be. And from my experience,
can I link with that really? To be honest, though, so the goalkeeper coach, I only met him because I was working as a teacher, not because I was working as a coach. He was working as a coach on a college program that I was working as the academic tutor. It was nothing to do with coaching.
Yeah. So just something completely diverse. Yeah, where you wouldn't have seen it coming.
Those little different steps, you know, like it's that butterfly effect. You don't know who's what and who's doing what and where you end up. But you take the opportunities that you can find. I think that's the best way to, rather than waiting for them.
Yeah, and sometimes I don't know, you know, the demographic of people on the call, but I'm 34, you're 31. The older you get, the harder it is to make those decisions, to make those big jumps, to make those moves, because you're leaving more behind, aren't you?
Yeah.
Whether it's personal responsibilities, families, you know, if you've got mortgage to pay, that sort of thing. So people on the call, I guess, if you are thinking about going out, looking for opportunities overseas, you know, don't waste time about it, you know, because life passes you by very quickly. Right, let's try and be a bit more upbeat now. Here we go.
It's a great idea.
Final question, and this is an interesting one. Okay, so Bayern Munich FC have recently joined a growing list of pro clubs to close their academies from under 9 to 11, as they believe it's too soon to remove them from the grassroots clubs and other sports. Do you agree with this? And should the English FA make a rule for all professional clubs to follow this? This is from Dan C. It's an interesting question.
Hi, Dan. Thanks, mate. I agree with Bayern Munich doing it. I don't necessarily think it works the same in England. My entire thing is always about, and Dan knows this, is the key is to start with each individual child that is involved in whatever it is. It's individual person, what's best for them. So the academy system in England, I'm not an expert, nowhere near an expert. There's a lot of people out there who know a lot more than me about it, but the opportunities, the environment, and I suppose the support that the big clubs that they can provide is incredible. Right? The young boys who go to Manchester City get a private education, and you know it's an opportunity that some of the boys that are there, they might never have, they probably never dream of that without their football, without what their hard work has produced. You know, if you take away everything else, those 10, 12 boys who go there at under 9 have won the ultimate golden ticket. It doesn't matter what happens with football. And I guess the people and the ideas around what academy football is has changed a lot recently. So I think if you asked me this 10 years ago, my straight up answer would have been yes. Yes, I think it's ridiculous. But now I'm not so sure it is, because of the way that the expertise is now utilised and developed, and the way that it's all monitored and carefully constructed to provide the best opportunities for kids. There's a guy called Nick Cox at Man United who, you know, do some research on what he does. You know, I think again those kids who go to Man United, what a wonderful opportunity and environment to be in. You know, they have this almost like wonderful world that they get to live in, that they choose to because their talent has enabled them to be there.
It's a difficult one, isn't it, Jamie? Because I'm a Brentford fan, and Brentford have been in the press over the last few years because they closed their academy because they didn't, from an ethical point of view, they felt like there were, you know, 13 kids that were never going to make it, and they were facilitating an environment for those 2 kids that were going to go on and have a professional career. So it didn't sit right with their values and their ethos. And
was it ethical or was it financial?
Well, financial as well, yeah. So you hear 2 different sides to it. So they're weighing up the balance of both. And it's an interesting argument. It's like you say, there's no right or wrong, but it's an interesting one to debate. And like you say, some of those kids, they've got a real opportunity if they do access those, you know, the academies these days. But yeah, a lot of it goes down to personal preference, doesn't it, of the parents, because the parents have got to be the ones that make the decision for their kids, and it's a big pressure. And yeah, some of them can be real life changing. But those are the questions, Jamie. Thanks for answering those. Those are the ones that came in advance. We've covered a hell of a lot, and appreciate your time.